the suffocating quiet of the strategic. Briefing hall was shattered when my own father pointed across 200 officers and called me a nobody. General Richard Vance bellowed his mocking laughter, telling me to sit down before I embarrassed his name further. He had no idea that the heavily decorated Special Forces commander entering the auditorium was not there for him. The elite officer was searching specifically for me. I sat rigidly in the back row, wearing my Air Force Major uniform with flawless discipline. For over 30 years, I had trained myself to remain practically invisible, perfecting the art of survival under the commanding glare of my father. Down on the main floor, my father held court like a monarch, surrounded by eager subordinates who laughed at his every joke. They cared only about his 3 stars and his political influence. My father had spent my entire life erasing my existence whenever I attempted to forge my own path. I remembered sitting at our family dinner table at 18, proudly announcing that I had scored in the top tier on military entrance exams. My father had simply laughed, dismissing my dreams as foolish nonsense and suggesting I become a nurse instead. He then turned to lavish praise on my lazy brother. When I injured my shoulder during grueling tactical training years later, my father sent a cold message demanding my immediate resignation. He did not ask if I was in pain or recovering, but instead insisted I move home and marry a neighbor. That cold rejection transformed my deep sadness into an unyielding resolve. I swore I would become an operative so skilled and distant that he could never reach me. I endured the absolute nightmare of elite sniper school, lying motionlessly in freezing mud for 18 hours to prove my worth. Eventually deployed to harsh combat zones, I accumulated precise long-range engagements while protecting teams on dangerous covert missions. My teammates began calling me Spectre-Seven because I disappeared into thin air after every briefing. My father believed I was doing administrative work, entirely blind to my real identity. Now inside the sterile briefing room at MacDill, Colonel Dominic Cross stalked down the center aisle in tactical gear. The chatter in the room evaporated instantly as the battle-hardened Navy SEAL approached the stage. Colonel Cross demanded an immediate Tier 1 asset, with top-level security clearance, for a critical overseas crisis. My father offered him standard pilots, completely unaware of the true gravity of the situation. When Colonel Cross clarified that he needed a classified recon sniper, my chest pounded with familiar focus. I stood tall in the back row, my posture straight and sharp, ready to take the assignment. My father whirled around in fury, ordering me to sit down immediately. He publicly mocked me, telling 200 high-ranking officers that I was merely a supply officer who exaggerated her worth. A wave of quiet chuckles spread through the room as my father asserted his dominance over me once again. He told me I was a complete zero in the situation and commanded me not to make him look bad. I sat down briefly, feeling a cold surge of determination rather than humiliation. My father turned back to Colonel Cross with a confident smile, offering to find him a real operative. Colonel Cross ignored my father completely and walked straight toward my seat in the back row. He asked me directly to confirm my operational, call sign, and security clearance level before the gathered audience. I answered clearly that I was Spectre-Seven, holding Level 5 Special Access clearance. The entire room went dead silent as the face of my father turned completely pale from pure shock. Level 5 clearance meant I answered to covert authorities far above the 3-star rank of my father. My father stammered in disbelief, claiming I was lying and demanding his staff verify my administrative status. But his chief officer quietly confirmed that my file was restricted top secret, Black Ops beyond their base access. The surrounding officers stared in utter disbelief, realizing the general knew nothing about his own daughter. Colonel Cross informed me that our transport aircraft was waiting on the tarmac for immediate takeoff. I stepped out of my row while former mockers quickly scrambled out of my path with newfound respect. My father tried to step into the aisle to forbid me from leaving, his voice trembling with desperation. I looked at him with quiet pity, telling him he lacked clearance, and walked away. Hours later, I was lying on a dusty ridge overlooking a remote village near the Hadramaut Mountains. Through high-powered optics, I located an enemy sniper who had pinned down the extraction squad led by Colonel Cross. I carefully calculated wind velocity, distance, and atmospheric pressure, completely focused on the critical task ahead. My personal phone buzzed continuously with missed calls from my father, but I powered the device off completely. I took a slow breath, held it at the bottom of the exhale, and gently squeezed the trigger. The heavy round traveled over a mile through the air, neutralizing the target and opening an escape window for the squad. Colonel Cross successfully rescued the hostages and later submitted an official report commending my exceptional precision under pressure. For the first time in my life, I felt absolute professional fulfillment. Back at base, the news of the briefing room revelation spread like wildfire through every rank. My father attempted to force officers into opening my classified personnel file, but he was firmly warned about severe federal violations. When he walked into the dining hall days later, the usual crowd of eager flatterers completely ignored him. The illusion of his total control had shattered, leaving him isolated in his own command. Months later, I met my father at a quiet coffee shop away from the military base. He appeared visibly aged and smaller without his uniform, trying to justify his past behavior as protective concern. I firmly interrupted him, laying down strict rules for how he would treat me going forward. I told him he would respect my rank, my adulthood, and my independence, or we would have no relationship. 10 years passed, and I stood on stage at Langley Air Force. Base receiving my promotion to lieutenant colonel, my father sat in the audience as a retired civilian, quietly wiping tears of regret and quiet acceptance from his eyes. After the ceremony, I mentored a young female officer who was struggling under the high expectations of her father. Passing along the strength I had fought so hard to earn, I realized that setting boundaries with toxic family is not an act of anger, but a declaration of self-worth. You hold the pen to your own life narrative, and no one else gets to define your value. I stepped into the warm sunlight, no longer seeking approval or hiding in the shadows. I was no longer just the daughter of my father, but a leader who had finally claimed her freedom.